A quick timeline note before we start. I recorded this episode after documents 25 through 28 were filed and before documents 29 through 31 appeared on the actual docket. So what you're about to watch reflects the case as it stood at that moment. Episode 4.5 covers what happened next, the new attorney appearances, the Turtle Wow connection, and Blizzard withdrawing its early discovery request without prejudice. This is public commentary. The allegations are not findings, and I do not represent anyone in this case. Hey guys, it's Cody. Now, BlizzCon opens Saturday, September 12th. And on the current court schedule, Derek Powell and 3 other defendants appear due to answer Blizzard's complaint or file a motion under Rule 12 on Tuesday, September 8th. Interesting timing, don't you think? 4 days before BlizzCon, Blizzard's biggest event. That calendar is real. The filings do not tell us who wanted that timing or why. The date can also move if the parties agree or the court orders something different. But right now, the response clock in Blizzard's lawsuit runs directly into BlizzCon week. And the most important new filing for this episode is document 28. Derek Powell has waived formal service of the lawsuit through an attorney. So the case has moved from Blizzard naming Derek to Derek's response clock actually running. Last episode, I ended with a promise. Blizzard keeps using one word, defendants. But if Blizzard wants liability against a person, it has to prove what that person did. This is episode 4. This is the Derek audit. Welcome. And this is commentary, public commentary. I do not represent Derek Powell, Project Ascension, Blizzard, or any defendant in this case. Blizzard's allegations are allegations unless they are admitted or proven. Today, I'm doing one thing, separating what Blizzard's complaint actually attaches to Derek Powell from what it says about defendants as a group. Blizzard gets to allege. Blizzard still has to prove what the new filings do. Now, documents 25 through 28 were filed on July 9th. They are 4 waivers of service. One is for Online Success Partner, which identifies itself in the filing as doing business as online management partners. One is for Brian Mannion. One is for Exalted Management Services. And one is for Derek Powell. This batch covers 4 of the 10 named defendants. It does not resolve service or for anyone else, everyone else. That same attorney, Frederick Douglass, signed all 4. That shows coordination around this service step. A later appearance or substantive filing will tell us how far that representation goes on the merits. These waivers acknowledge receipt of the complaint and save Blizzard the expense of formal service. The forms also say the defendants keep their defenses and objections to the lawsuit, personal jurisdiction, as well as the venue. The service-related objection they give up is one based on a defect in the summons or service of the summons. These forms complete the service step for those 4 parties. Now, an answer or motion still has to come, and signing the waiver admits none of Blizzard's allegations. The defense theory has not arrived yet, but for these 4 parties, the service question is now resolved, and the response clock is running. Hey y'all, real quick, I wrote this book called Lawyer Without Law School. There's a lot of tips and tricks on how you can get started with studying the law without actually going to law school, without actually putting yourself in supreme debt. There's even states where you can become a licensed attorney through passing the bar. Just pass the bar, you find a supervising attorney, and you get to work studying the law. No bullshit, just the law. Lawyer Without Law School, check it out. The BlizzCon clock. Well, each waiver says the request was sent on July 7th and gives 60 days to file an answer or a Rule 12 motion. The 60th day is indeed Saturday, September 5th. The following Monday is Labor Day. Under the federal time counting rule, that points to Tuesday, September 8th, as the apparent deadline, unless something changes on the docket. Now, BlizzCon begins Saturday, September 12th. That is a 4-day gap. If the schedule holds, Derek's first substantive response could land during the biggest public week on Blizzard's calendar. That could become a major story heading into the event. The timing itself does not prove a strategy, if you will. The record gives us the dates, sure. It does not give us anyone's motive for choosing them. So I'm keeping those two things separate. The calendar is worth reporting, of course. The intent still needs evidence. Blizzard's best case against Derek. Now, as we talked about before anybody turns 196 versus 14 into a trick, Blizzard's Derek allegations are serious. Paragraphs 20 and 49 allege that Derek Powell and Brian Mannion were the owners, operators, administrators, and driving forces behind Project Ascension. Blizzard alleges they directed operations, development, servers, finances, staff, marketing, payment processing, and the corporate entities around the project. Blizzard alleges money from donation points was collected for their benefit. Paragraph 66 names Derek inside a group of 6 people accused of repeatedly altering the World of Warcraft client. Paragraph 72 alleges Derek was among the people providing technical support. Paragraph 78 says Blizzard contacted Derek and Mannion through email, hand delivery, and telephone, told them the project violated Blizzard's rights, and says the conduct continued. Blizzard also places Derek near the center of its RICO leadership theory. That is Blizzard's case against Derek at its strongest. If records show Derek controlled the money, approved releases, directed the people doing the work, managed the infrastructure, personally benefited and received Blizzard's warnings, then this case becomes dangerous for him. 14 mentions can be enough when the evidence attaches. The count is not the legal test, no. The count tells us where to perform the audit. 196 versus 14. I took Blizzard's complaint, 51 pages and 171 numbered paragraphs, and counted 2 things. The first, capital D, plural, word defendants. It appears 196 times. Then I counted the surname Powell in the body of the complaint. That was 14 times. That gap does not mean Derek wins. Complaints commonly define a group and use that group throughout the claims. Plaintiffs also use discovery to obtain records they do not possess when the lawsuit begins. But group language can only take the case so far. A judgment against Derek still needs a factual and legal bridge to Derek. One group word covers individuals, companies, alleged developers, support staff, payment entities, and people with completely different alleged roles. So I went through the Powell reference and asked one question. What does each one actually attach to him? The 4 piles. The first pile is the job description. Paragraphs 20 and 49 describe Derek and Mannion as owners, operators, administrators, masterminds, if you will, and the people primarily directing Project Ascension. Those are powerful labels. In court, every leadership verb becomes a request for records. Directed whom? Managed which account? Approved which release? Supervised which person? Controlled which server? Collected which payment? Now, the second pile is the companies and the money. Blizzard characterizes several entities as shells or alter egos used for Derek and Mannion's benefit. That is Blizzard's allegation. It should rise or fall on corporate records, accounting, processor records, ownership documents, bank records, and actual distributions. Gross revenue is not automatically personal profit. Corporate money is not automatically Derek's money. If Blizzard can trace it to him, show it. The third pile is the technical allegation. Paragraph 66C names Derek, but it names him inside a group of 6 people accused of repeatedly altering the client. The complaint does not identify a specific file, commit, date, device, repository, or individual act by Derek in that particular paragraph. Blizzard may obtain those records in discovery. If it does, we follow them. Right now, the Derek-specific questions are simple. Which file, which commit, which accounts, which release, which act by Derek? The fourth pile contains 3 issues we covered earlier: support, donation points, and Blizzard's warning. I'm keeping them defendant-specific here. Which support message came from Derek? Which payment account or distribution benefited Derek? Which warning reached Derek, and what happened after he received it? Document 28 proves that Derek has now acknowledged receipt of the complaint through the waiver process. It does not prove he received Blizzard's earlier warnings before the lawsuit. That requires the emails, delivery records, phone records, and response history Blizzard says exist. That is the bridge Blizzard still has to build. This is Blizzard's own receipt. Blizzard's early discovery, the filing, helps explain why that bridge is incomplete. In Document 21, Blizzard told the court its pre-filing investigation relied on publicly available information. It said it did not have internal party or third-party documents. It said it could not be certain that every person and entity was properly named or that it had identified every necessary defendant. That is not Blizzard admitting it has no case. It is Blizzard explaining why it wants subpoenas. Discovery is supposed to test identities, roles, accounts, payments, and control. And we already seen one naming issue develop. That was the one, the complaint named Online Management Partners as an entity of unknown form. The new waiver identifies the responding party as Online Success Partner, doing business as Online Management Partners, while still saying the complaint named it incorrectly. That does not decide the identity issue. It shows why exact names and exact records do indeed matter. Blizzard's filing is more careful than a lot of the internet discussion. It says, in effect, we have a theory, we need records to verify it. Well, fair enough. Now we watch whether those records verify Derek. Records both ways. Here is the scoreboard in both directions. Blizzard's Derek case gets stronger if, and only if, Discovery produces payment, records tied to him, repository or admin access tied to him, release approvals, server control, communications where he directs the proof or the money and proof that he received, Blizzard's warnings. If so, it gets stronger if those records connect Derek personally to the alleged client changes, financial benefit, inducement, or RICO conduct. The defense gets stronger if authority set somewhere else. If Derek had no relevant repository access, no control over the payment accounts, no authority over the servers, no personal distributions, no client commits, or no receipt of the pre-suit warnings, those facts matter. The waiver itself answers none of those questions. It moves us toward the filing that might. Well, what happens next? The next response could be an answer. It could be a Rule 12 motion challenging jurisdiction, venue, or the legal sufficiency of some claims. It could come before September. The parties could also agree to more time, or the court could change the schedule. An Online Success Partner previously asked to file a substantive opposition to Blizzard's early discovery request by July 10th. So this docket needs another check before I record and before this video goes live. The important point today is that 4 parties have acknowledged the lawsuit. Derek is one of them, and the case is moving toward an actual defense response. So here's where episode 4 leaves us. Derek Powell has acknowledged receipt of the lawsuit through a waiver signed by the same attorney who signed for 3 other defendants. On the current calendar, his response appears due Tuesday, September 8th. BlizzCon begins 4 days later. If that schedule holds, we may see an answer or motion during the most important public week on Blizzard's calendar. And when it arrives, the question stays the same. Does the filing address what Derek personally controlled, directed, received, knew, or did? Blizzard wrote Defendants 196 times. Powell appears 14 times in the body of the complaint. Neither number decides the case. Records do. Blizzard named Derek Powell. Now, it has to prove Derek. One final reminder, because this episode discusses a real named person. Analyze the filings. Do not dox, threaten, contact, brigade, or publish private information about anyone involved. Next episode, I want to ask where Blizzard's protected World of Warcraft expression ends, and where shared creative language and player imagination begin. Blizzard gets to allege. Blizzard still has to prove. Thank you for watching.
I got gold up in my pockets cause I flip it on the auction. Then I run it like Monopoly, too strong, you can't stop me, yeah. Gold shot biddies wanna ride me like no ending. I'm a orc in the Lord with my sword, I be swinging. I got gold up in my pockets cause I flip it on the auction. Then I run it like Monopoly, too strong, you can't stop. From Ogre Gates to the Stormwind docks, I say when the stocks move. I control the lights, buy low, sell high, put the game on lock. When I walk into the auction, every praise gonna drop, yeah. Gold shot biddies wanna ride me like no ending. I'm a orc in the Lord with my sword, I be swinging. I got gold up in my pockets cause I flip it